Hello, Stephen Long here, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Gaston's Great podcast. This week's episode is part one of a two-part recording in an effort to keep each episode a little shorter. Thanks again, and we hope you enjoy it. Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 133 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we're coming to you once again from the international headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We're highlighting another great organization this week as we highlight Camp Centurion. We have Ken Heavner and Joe Dunn with us today. Ken is the current president of the board and organization, and Joe is the current director of the organization. Joe and Ken, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as usual, we try to just get right to it, and maybe I'll start with you, Joe. Before we get into the specifics of Camp Centurion, maybe just share a little bit about yourself, anything you'd like to share for our listeners, and then we'll get into the organization.
I'm a Gaston County boy.
Okay, yeah, good for you. Me too.
Mount Holly, Stanley, graduated East Gaston in '94. Been Gaston County all my life. However, in December, I moved to Lincoln County.
Okay.
So now I live in Lincoln. Boger City area.
We won't hold that against you.
Well, you know, we hold it against Ken.
Yep, because I'm from Lincoln County.
Gastonia's home.
Okay.
You know, my whole family's here for the most part.
Okay.
Big family on both sides. My dad's family's out of Belmont. Mother's family's kind of Lucia area.
My mom's family's from Lucia.
Yep.
Matter of fact, John Fraser Road. I don't know if you've ever seen John Fraser.
Yeah. My niece actually lives off of John Fraser.
Yeah, John Fraser's my grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something I went long. I took all my kids up there, make sure they saw their grandfather, the road named after their grandfather.
So my grandparents were on Cox Road.
Okay.
Yeah. And I still have an aunt that lives on Cox Road, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
So,
I get up there when we can.
Spent my summers up there working hard.
Still have some uncles, an uncle and cousins that live right there at
my mother
off of Stanley
currently
Lucia Road.
lives right on the Gaston Lincoln County Rhine off of Business 16.
Okay. Yep.
So she's not far either.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, good. Well, listen, I appreciate you sharing that. But, listeners like to hear a little bit about our guests before we kind of get into the specifics. So, Ken, anything you'd like to tell us about yourself?
Joe didn't share that he is an Army veteran as well as I'm an Army veteran.
Well, we appreciate that very much.
I am from Lincoln County. I've been in Lincoln County my entire life. Served 23 years in the Army. I retired a couple Octobers ago, and kind of the whole Camp Centurion thing, kind of some divine intervention landed me there, and we can probably talk about that in a minute. But since then, I'm a court manager for the Gaston County for the Veterans Court. I've been doing that for a little bit over a month now.
Okay.
Been involved a little bit longer than that. I run a farm in Lincoln County. We have some farm animals, my wife and my children. And but really, again, I just wanted to say thank you for giving us this opportunity today.
Sure.
I really don't. I know you want to know a little bit about us, but Joe and I both will tell you it's about everything is about more than us while we're sitting here today.
All right. So again, I appreciate that. So you know what? And I think that's indicative of most organizations that have a mission like yours and have a passion for serving others. So and that's typically what we hear, and that's what is required, frankly, to get organizations like yours operating. So maybe Ken, stay with you. Ultimately, this is maybe I'd like to hear from both of you. We're going to have listeners out there who don't know what Camp Centurion is. So maybe just give us the quick, what is it? What's the mission? And then we'll get into maybe a little more specifics. But
yeah, the abbreviated version of that is we house low income and homeless veterans, and we are transitional housing for those veterans. We have a 12-month program. There's certain requirements, obviously, and certain rules. But at the end of the day, if you look, and I'll kind of go back a little bit on the backstory of how we came about, right?
Okay.
So 3 Vietnam veterans were having coffee at an Outback or somewhere in Gaston County probably 7 or 8 years ago, and they were talking about homelessness in Gaston County. They were talking about homeless veterans. and during their conversation, they're like, well, they were talking about substance use and things like that. They're like, well, somebody, if you can't treat, like, if you can't get them off the street, then what do they have to look forward to? So if someone that wants to go and get substance abuse treatment, right? Well, if I don't have nowhere to look forward to going to, right? After I complete that, then why should I even go, right? Because I'm just going to go right back to the street. I'm just going to go right back to living the way that I was. So they came up with the concept of Camp Centurion, and then they got the nonprofit. This was back in like 2017.
Okay.
So we've had our nonprofit status since 2017, but then it took years, right? It took years to find a property. It took years to fundraise, to be able to completely remodel a house that was condemned and the roof was falling in. Like, it was like literally it had black mold. It had to go all the way down to the studs,
Yikes,
right?
Yeah, no good.
So then you kind of you fast forward through all that work, and I tell you, like, I've only been with Camp Centurion about a year.
Okay.
Literally, from my time as a director and from my time now. But it took years to get to that, to get to like November of 2022 was basically when, hey, we're ready to do something, right? Everything's kind of in place. The house is ready. It's remodeled. And then they kind of waited on me a little while, right? Because that's how, when I made my divine intervention point, right? Because I retired from the Army that October before, roughly, right? So I retired, and then I was out, did my honey-do list, did all these things, and I was bored. I'm just going to call it what it is. I was bored. And my wife and my children and I, we were building a house at the time. We were living in a camper. It was a Wednesday evening. We were getting ready to go to church. And I was on, like, Indeed, just dropping applications, right? And then I saw this thing for a residential manager or a director for Camp Centurion. I was like, oh, it's not a lot, but it's something to do. I need something to do. And my wife's like, yeah, you need something to do. So I just submitted. I hit submit. And within a few minutes, I got a text from Joel Dalton, who was the current board president, saying, hey, what are you doing? And Joel had retired a few years before me. I was like, listen, it's funny you talked about, leaving and going away and then trying to find, a way to kind of reintegrate yourself and things like that. I mean, that goes for any veteran, war aside. It's like you do the same thing for 22, 23 years, and then all of a sudden you go from going 150 miles an hour to just like a slow trot. And Joe's nodding his head because he knows. Like, you go to just like, what do I do with my hands, right? Because everything's always been go.
Seems like you go from a relatively clear mission then to what? Yeah.
And going back.
Men like to have a mission, something to do, something to look forward to.
And Joel said, I got something you can do. I was like, I'm waiting on the joke, right? And he's like, no, I'm the board president at Camp Centurion. So next thing you know, there I am.
Wow.
So it's kind of that's why I call that the divine intervention that got me to even be involved with the organization.
So, Joe, how did you get involved with Camp Centurion?
Well, I retired in December of 2020.
Okay.
Goofed off, was a professional grandfather and amateur fisherman for 4 years. Didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't have a clue, had some issues mentally. And then finally just decided to take that step. Well, our friend Joel was my boss when I was in the military. And he also works for Purple Heart Homes. I asked for a job, if they had any jobs at Purple Heart Homes, and he immediately responded, he goes, no, but I have one at Camp Centurion. So Camp Centurion is my first civilian job after the military.
And it's been, what did I hear, a month and a half or something?
In of June?
A couple months?
No, it was the 1st of June, excuse me.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting. So, again, I appreciate you sharing a little bit of background and how, and it's typically, organizations that we've talked to over the last over 3 years now, typically there's a small group or an individual who has a mission, they see a need, and, and they just, they're just going to say, we're going to do it. We're going to fill it. And the story is often what you just described too. It's, at first, oh yeah, we'll have this knocked out, in 6 months, but it's never that easy, right? It's always a much longer journey, or typically is. So, kind of, I don't know that initiatives or projects or kind of maybe a better way to ask this question is describe the day in the life of Camp Centurion, a week, a month, kind of what's going on there. And this is kind of, I'll just throw it out for both of you so y'all can talk over each other, but.
I'll start and let Ken fill in if I'm
Okay.
missing anything. So basically, day to day is talking to donors, asking for volunteers, handling financial stuff, coordinating services for our residents, like transportation to doctor's appointments, or trying to find them a job. Trying to get them some type of reliable transportation, stuff like that. We also have food pickup 2 times a week because we get food donated. So 2 times a week, we're going to pick up food, bringing it back to the house so we can feed them.
That's from Dallas Christian Ministry.
Correct. Dallas
Okay.
Christian, yes.
And she's been on here long. That was one of the early episodes.
A lot of email stuff.
Okay.
People asking questions. People want to donate clothes. Like a lady called last week. Her husband was in the military. He passed. She wanted to donate all his clothes to Camp Centurion. So it's a lot of logistics.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of running around.
I would think.
We're kind of small. We have two employees, myself and my assistant, and we're the ones that have to kind of make it happen, so to speak. And currently, right now, we only have 1 resident, so it's not that hectic. But this is the guy that started everything, so he could probably add to a whole lot.
Yeah, and I'll go back to Joe talking about, because I don't want to hear people. I don't want people say, well, hey, they need clothing, right? Because yes, sometimes we need clothing, but I tell you, and what we have something set up with Trinity Assembly of God out of Bessemer City. They have a thrift store. We refer anybody that wants to donate clothing. We refer them to there because our guys, because we only house males right now. If they need something, they go there and they get it for free. It's no charge. We just don't have the space. It'd be just for carloads and carloads of someone while we're thankful to donate clothing, we just don't have anywhere to put it.
Sure.
We're working on that to have some kind of outside like clothing closet thing, but we're not there yet. And you go back to the day to the everyday at Camp Centurion, right? It's unpredictable, like most things are. I'll tell you, when I was in Joe's role, it was, checking the voicemail machine first thing to see who we're going to talk to that day, to see who may need help. And what I would like to do is walk you through maybe, from that point.
Okay.
Right? From that point of a veteran who's in need. It really goes to that first phone call conversation, and then hopefully that leads to like a sit-down interview with that individual, because it's kind of our process. I will tell you a little bit about our program. I did mention it was 12 months, and Joe said we got 1 guy in the house, but we also got another guy that's in the house, but he's going to be coming back. He's at substance abuse treatment right now. And that's kind of the segue to where I'll make this next point is when I say we're transitional housing.
Right.
We're not equipped. We're not a rehab center, right? We're not equipped for that kind of thing. We're just not able to. So this gentleman, when he gets done with this next set of inpatient treatment, he'll come back and he'll live in the home.
Okay.
Right? And I'll tell you, like he lived in the home for months before his relapse, right? And relapses happen. They definitely happen. The average addict relapses 6 or 7 times before they get it right, if they do get it right. So you take that phone call, you make that interview. We do have, people will say, well, there's a lot of requirements, right, to be able to be a veteran, to be able to be housed and live at Camp Centurion. I would say yes. But what I tell people is if the individual veteran puts in the effort, right, and wants to meet us where we are, and we meet them where they are, then we can help them. But if it's, and many times, and we've experienced, if it's us, doing all the heavy lifting, right, If it's us doing all the heavy lifting, trying to help somebody, and they're not putting in the effort, we're the only one pulling the rope, then all we're doing is enabling them.
Right.
So there's a very, very, very fine line there, right, to waver on one side or the other, and it's a art and it's a science to try to stay on that fine line. I'll tell you, Joe mentioned about transportation and things like that. Yes, we do. We help with transportation. We don't give people rides. We get them rides, right? We partner with Veterans Community Alliance. Yeah, I'm a Lincoln County boy. It's out of Lincoln County, right? But they help. What they do, they're another nonprofit, right? But they help. They work on veterans' cars, right? And they help veterans get cars if needed. So it's all about those relationships and those partnerships, because we can't do it all by ourselves, and we've realized that it's like a hub and spoke exercise, right? You have what you want to accomplish and what you need to do, but then you got all these other places where you got to go try to get the help you need. And we try to be that hub and spoke, right, for our residents and for the people that we house. It's like, okay, you need a job. Okay, we're going to get you a job. You're going to have to go work that job. and you laugh because it's some people don't want to work.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, we require residents to work, like within 30 days of being housed. We're going to help you find a job. It doesn't have to be your forever job. It's a starter job. It might be a part-time job, 20 hours a week. But you've got to put, like I said, there's where that effort comes into play, right? It can be your starter job, and then you can look for we can work on better employment. Because I tell people too, when I say, hey, we're transitional housing, we're not a rehab center, but we're not a retirement home either. I mean, it's just not what we're not. You just got to paint the picture. And we do require people to work. We require them to pass a drug test and a breathalyzer test, right, to move in the home. Like, we want to help people. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, people need to want to help themselves.
Right.
And I'll say it this way too: you cannot save somebody that does not want to save themselves. So really, it's all these different services, right? We bump them against our rules, this, that, and another. Yes, you have to be a veteran, kind of like requirement. You have to be a veteran. You have to have. There's certain characters of separation that don't qualify, right? But there's questions that are asked, and there's processes for those, and we always try to work through to get to yes, right? You always try to work through to get to yes. Sometimes you can get to yes, sometimes it's no. Like when you bluntly ask somebody, and this is the sad fact, right? Because this is kind of where the world is right now. It's a sad fact when you say, hey, do you abuse drugs or alcohol? And they say yes. And it's heartbreaking, right? But this next part is really heartbreaking. Well, would you be willing for us to help you get somewhere, to get some help, right? So that you can come live in this home, because it's a home. So you can come live here. And sometimes we get, no, I'm not going to quit drinking, or no, I'm not going to quit smoking weed, or, and it's just, okay, well, we'll refer you to this place, and this place, and then sometimes you tell people, hey, we're going to require you to work. No, I'm not going to work. Okay, then we're going to refer you to this place, and this place. So it's I'll say it this way, it's a very constringent funnel, right?
Okay. Funnel
to get to that, like, one person that we have in the house right now that you can actually try to help.
How do you get in touch with potential residents? I mean, how do you hear about them, or how do they hear about you, or typically,
it's just referrals.
Okay.
Or they'll call and leave a voicemail, or the Veteran Service Office will be like, hey, I got this guy. It's really word of mouth. It's surrounding counties, because when you look at our location, we're right there on the end of Besttown Road off Dallas Cherryville Highway. You can throw a rock and hit Lincoln and Cleveland counties. So, like, and that leads me to another point is, like, we don't care where you're from.
Right.
Like, we don't, like, but we will, if you meet the requirements to be housed, we will house you.
What would be considered a full house?
We have 8 beds.
Okay.
That would be what I consider a full house, because I'll tell you probably around 5 or 6 is probably the sweet spot with the bandwidth that we have right now.
Right.
Probably around 5 or 6 with 1 full-time director and 1 part-time assistant. That's about the bandwidth that we would have. And I will say that we got up to around 5 last November while I was running the home. I was still doing it by myself, and it was a lot.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was a lot.
So you've already shared a little bit about that, but can you something jump out? Do you have an anecdotal story you could tell somebody that was in the home and they've moved on? I'm not sure how y'all describe that. And just an example of what you might consider a success story.
I mean, to me, a success story is somebody that we housed, right? And they came to us and said, "Hey, I'm ready to go," right? So we've had one of those. He moved on. I won't dwell too far into that, but I'm going to tell you that in measuring success, right, in regards to what we do, we are not measured by the outcomes. Okay, we are measured by the effort that we, as an organization, put in to whatever outcome it was, because an individual person, right? An individual person, they're responsible for their own outcomes, but we are only responsible. We measure success by the effort that we put in.
Is it fair to say you're measuring and responsible for that? You just called it transition, right? Whatever that transition time period is, and whatever services you can help them with during that time period. Is that a fair?
Yeah, right. I believe so. Yeah. I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode, which was part 1 of a 2-part recording. Please tune back in next week to hear the second part. Thanks again, and please continue to spread the word about the Gaston's Great podcast.